Hello guys, and Merry Christmas, and for the PC people, Happy Holidays. Anyway, I am so excited for Christmas that I'm doing my first wish list video, in which I'm doing requests by you guys for creepypasta stories. So, let's get this out of the way, because at the time of recording this, I only have 12 hours, 3 minutes, and 27 seconds till Christmas! I love Christmas. So, let's get this out of the way. This pasta is pretty interesting. It didn't end up showing random gore or other things to that nature. It was like as if Sylvester completely snapped after his abuse and decided to get revenge on everyone. Granted, I'm not sure where this cartoon came from, but I guess it's what adds more suspense to the story. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you remember watching Looney Tunes as a kid. So do I. And my favorite character was Sylvester the Cat, until one night back in the summer of 1998, I saw an episode that rather frightened me. But since the cartoon played at late night, when I should have already gone to bed, I was half asleep, so I only remembered parts of it, like a creepy TV in Sylvester's room that turned on all by itself. I thought maybe it was just a nightmare. Sadly, it wasn't. 1 year later, the next summer, me and my brother were bored on an afternoon, so we decided to watch some TV. We selected Cartoon Network, just in time when Looney Tunes was starring. It played 2 normal episodes of Sylvester, nothing special. Except for one thing. When the second part was coming to its end, me and my brother felt like something wasn't right. We thought that it might show that certain episode once again. And it happened. Angry Sylvester. The episode didn't have the same intro that most of the Looney Tunes cartoons had, neither the catchy title music. It just skipped right to the title screen. It didn't even fade. It just switched right there. There was no title written on the screen, it just showed the living room of a house. And it looked like it was drawn entirely with only 2 colors, blood red and black as emptiness. There wasn't any music there either. The only sound that could be heard during this part was a woman saying "directed by." The creepy thing about it was that it was in our country's native language, Hungarian. And this happened way before Cartoon Network started broadcasting it in our country's native language. And it sounded like if the announcer had been strangled by somebody. Then the episode started. Once again, it didn't fade at the beginning. It just switched right there. It showed Sylvester standing in front of something that looked like a military base. There wasn't any music or sound either, just dead silence. Sylvester also didn't look like he did in any of our cartoons. He looked bruised and badly beaten, and his eyes had no pupils. He didn't say anything. He just looked really angry. In the next scene, he entered the military base. It was empty. No guards and soldiers were there. But Sylvester still entered, and he wanted to get revenge on the people for what they did to him. So he decided to sabotage the military base by destroying all the lights hanging from the ceiling. Also looked very disturbing. While Sylvester was tearing down the lights, his claws grew to a ridiculous size, and they were covered in blood and oil. The only sound that could be heard in this scene was the sound of sparking electricity, which also sounded very loud and frighteningly realistic. The scene also was flashing rapidly, making it even scarier, and also dangerous to people who suffer from epilepsy. The same scene also repeated itself 10 times until it cut to the next scene. In the next scene, Sylvester was at home. However, Granny, Trudy, or Hector was nowhere to be found. He was all alone. His room also looked empty and scary. The floor was blood red and the walls looked like if they were on fire. The room contained 2 tables. A large one that had something that looked like a toy Dalek and a screwdriver on it, and a smaller one that had an ancient TV on it. There was also a window in the background, but its beams were misaligned, so it looked like an inverted crucifix. Also outside it was just pitch black. Not if it was night outside, but like if there was literally no existence outside that window. So Sylvester proceeded to repair his toy Dalek with the screwdriver, when suddenly the TV on the small table behind him turned on by itself. The TV showed an extremely creepy cartoon. The background music sounded like somebody was randomly banging an electric guitar, and the recording was reversed and played back that way. It started by showing a forest with a cartoony moon above it with an extremely creepy look on its face. A few seconds later, it switched to a long room. The room was empty, but something could be heard looking at the end of the room, and it made a really creepy metallic thumping sound with every step it made. A few seconds later, it switched to the other end of the room. Porky Pig was standing there, also looking angry, and he was holding a pistol in his hand, but he didn't look bruised like Sylvester did. He said something to the monster at the other end of the room, and then fired his gun a few times. After that, it went static, and a few seconds later, a really loud bang was heard and the screen faded to red. A few seconds later, the red screen faded back to Sylvester in his room, staying next to a wreckage of his TV. He looked even angrier, even more bruised, and his eyes were blood red this time. The creepy image of angry Sylvester stayed on the screen for about 10 seconds, and then it just went black. About half a minute later, Cartoon Network came back, with a normal coming up next screen. Well, I've been somewhat interested in this story for a while. As a whole, it's not bad. I mean, it does somewhat gradually go into scary territory, but even then it's not actually that gory, since they do explain that it's just puppets and puppet material coming out to make it look like blood and stuff. I wish that the story was slightly longer to show Faye's transition to madness, but besides that, it's pretty well win. When I was younger, around the year 1987, there was a show called The Frightful Fables of Fickle Fae. The show was aired on a local channel in Central Florida, on Channel 17 if I remember correctly. The show was meant to be a mini-series around Halloween time for children. My uncle Marcus Buskirk was a producer in the early stages of creating the show. He told me that the show would use puppets to portray scary stories for children, and that the first episode would air on October 3rd, and the season finale would air on Halloween afternoon. The end of the episode marking the time the children would go outside to trick-or-treat. Being a 7-year-old girl at the time, the show seemed interesting enough, so I waited as patiently as I could for October 3rd to come around. On the afternoon the show would air, I sat on the floor of the living room, in front of the television, watching commercials for toys, sidewalk, chalk, restaurants, and hotels, as I waited for the show to start. The theme began, the words, "The Frightful Fables of Fickle Fae," appearing on the screen in dripping green letters, as the loud, ominous piano music played in the background. The music cut off as a small puppet with black and white stockings covering yellowish skin of her legs. She wore Mary Jane shoes, a dark blue skirt, and a fuzzy purple sweater. She walked into a dusty room with puppets resembling spiders and black cats with glowing eyes looking in the background. The puppet, who must have been Faye, was trembling, her bright pink pigtails bobbling slightly.
Hello, everyone.
She said in a high-pitched voice.
My name is Faye, and I'm very frightened. Tonight, I'd like to tell you a story. One very dark night, I was walking with my brother and 3 of our friends.
The episode chronicled Faye, her twin brother Fabian, and 3 of their friends, Amy, Mila, and Damien, walking into a dark haunted forest. The group encountered things like ghosts, witches, and monsters as they attempted to make their way through the forest and back home. The episode ended with Faye and Fabian in the shared bedroom, Fabian looking down at Faye from the top bunk, saying, "That wasn't so bad, was it, Faye?" Faye, who was under a cover shaking, squealed,
No, Fabian.
The episode was enough for me to want to watch the next one, so the next few weeks I watched, loyal to the new show. The show grew darker and darker with every new episode. Faye's attitudes towards her brother, friends, and the situations they were represented was fluctuating wildly, but the last episode was truly horrid, and no doubt the reason for the cancellation of the show. The theme started playing, but something was off. The piano music was playing backwards, now more ominous than before, and the usually green letters were now blood red. Faye walked on screen, her head turned away. Her clothes were torn and bloodstained, her skin in the same condition. She was trembling, but not in her usual comical way. It was more like a seizure. When she turned towards the camera, I noticed a major difference. Her usual painted-on eyes had been hauled out and replaced with glass taxidermy eyes, looking freakishly realistic on the small being puppet.
Hello, everyone. My name is Faye, and I'm not frightened anymore. This time, it's your turn to be the frightened one,
she said, glaring at the camera. Her usual comical stare gone.
So now, I'm here to tell you the most frightening fable yet.
The screen cut to Damien and Fabian had now joined Faye. Faye looked around at the other 4 puppets, then said,
I'll be back in a minute.
The camera followed Faye to a poorly lit kitchen, where she dug through the drawers as if looking for something specific.
Ah,
she exclaimed as she opened a drawer, pulling out a long butcher's knife. My eyes widened in shock at the item Faye now held in her hands. The puppet ran back to the main room, where she sat abnormally close to Amy. Faye smiled for a moment before taking the knife and cutting off the arm of her friend. laughing maliciously as Amy screamed in terror. The other puppets started running, but to no avail. Faye had caught up with them, and one by one began to dismember her friends, saving Fabian for last. The body parts of the other puppets I had come to know and love lay strewn about the floor, stuffing hanging out of the detached limbs. Even a small felt heart laid on the floor. The camera zooming in on it for a moment before Faye stopped on it, making blood screech through the material onto the floor on the dusty room. Fabian was huddled under a large piano, begging Faye to spare his life.
Not a chance, Fabian. You've always been the one to hurt me, the one to scare me all the time. The tables have turned, brother,
she said coldly, as she proceeded to cut his arms and legs off.
Now that wasn't so bad, was it, Fabian?
No, Faye, Fabian stuttered, fearing for his life, as Faye took the knife, lodging into Fabian's skull.
Trick or treat, kids!
Faye yelled happily, as the end credits started to roll. I did love that show as a kid, until the last episode. My Uncle Marcus never was the same after this. If you have any information about the show, please tell me. Well, this pasta is shit. I mean, it should be in my crappy troll series. Nevertheless, I hate that there's a satanic reference near the end to try to scare us. It's a lazy and cliche way. Enough said. It all began when I ordered a copy of Super Smash Bros. Melee for the Nintendo GameCube off eBay. It was extremely cheap, about $5. I bought it immediately. Maybe it was too much of a bargain, but I was willing to risk it since the game is hard to find in stores these days. I received the game 3 days after placing the order and decided to play it straight away. I vaguely remember the case containing a piece of paper. If memory serves right, it was a note from the seller himself notifying me that the game had some sort of a technical problem. I recall this making me slightly angry at first, as he explained that there was no refunds involved with such a cheap item. However, my anger wore off as soon as I began to play the game. After about a week into gameplay, I honestly began to wonder why such a cheap game, with an apparent fault, was running so smoothly, although I definitely wasn't complaining. I was nearing the end of the game, having almost all the characters unlocked. The next unlockable was Pichu, which was one of my favorite Pokemon, so naturally, I was excited to finally get the chance to play as him. As soon as I met the condition to unlock him, the screen displayed Challenger approaching, along with Pichu's silhouette, and a rather alarming sound effect. Every unlockable character was presented in this way. I began to doubt as to whether I was going to be able to win, but before I was even given a chance, the screen cut off and my console shut itself down. At first I was extremely frustrated because I had not saved the game, so I had to unlock Pichu all over again. My frustration got the better of me, so I completely forgot about the piece of paper that was given to me. I then angrily turned the console back on, and was ready to unlock Pichu once again. The game loaded up and I entered the single player mode. I found myself at the character selection screen, and for some odd reason, Pichu was selectable. I was confused, but at the same time excited. I could finally play as him. I realized that his sprite was different from the last time I played this game. It seemed sad and very distraught. Nevertheless, I chose to play as him, but to my dismay, the game froze, and exactly 3 seconds later, the stage Final Destination loaded. The stage's background was completely black, with no music, just sound effects. My character Pichu was staying in the middle of a void. I had no opponents. There was no timer. I attempted to move, but as soon as I did, Pichu took damage and the controller began to vibrate. I looked at the screen and there was nothing there. I had no idea what was attacking my character. I looked at the screen and there was nothing there. I had no idea what was attacking my character. This continued, and Pichu's percentage began to increase at a faster rate with each hit. I put the controller down since I couldn't do anything, and soon after the vibration stopped. Pichu, however, was continually receiving blows, and all I could do was watch. His percentage then came to an abrupt stop at exactly 666%. I began to have second thoughts as to what kind of technical issues this game had. Instantly, after hitting the 666% mark, music began to play. It was the ordinary soundtrack to the game, but instead playing in reverse and slowed down. It sounded like some sort of demonic chant. After the music had been playing for about 5 seconds, Pichu began to receive damage once again, his percentage increasing at a higher rate this time. A soft, weak voice began to whisper through my speakers. I couldn't make out what was being said. Then there was another whisper, this time louder and clearer. The Pichu asked for help, mumbling the words, "Help me," repeatedly. There was a desperate tone in his voice. At this point, I was in disbelief. I could not believe that a character in the game had just spoken to me. I wondered if someone had hacked this into the game, or if some supernatural being was actually speaking to me. Undoubtedly, I was in over my head. I've been wanting to do Creepypasta for a long time. I mean, I love the detail that went into this story, and I was intrigued about how detailed the video was. If I were to complain about anything, why does the video delete itself after viewing it, and why can't you just simply find a torrent again? Like, why does it just suddenly go away? It just seems like a cop-out to me, given that many of these stories do this cliché. Despite this, it's definitely a go read. Have you ever heard of the Fleischer Superman cartoons? They were a series of animations about the now iconic superhero Superman, with 17 episodes produced over the course of 1940 and 1943. The episodes produced from 1940 to 1942 were done by Fleischer Studios, and the last few episodes up until 1943 were produced by Famous Studios. For those who don't know, these Superman cartoons are often regarded as the principle of Western animation. They certainly have high quality, and they are quite memorable despite there only being 17 shorts produced. Well, supposedly, there is a lost episode. DC Comics and Paramount Pictures completely denied the existence of any such episode. Going by the accounts of those few people who claim to have seen this lost short, it's understandable why DC and Paramount wouldn't want this cartoon to be associated with them. From what little information exists, this cartoon was apparently commissioned in 1947 by the US War Department soon after the Cold War began. They resembled all the staff from Famous Studios who worked on the Superman shorts, and told them that they wanted a propaganda piece. The short doesn't seem to have been completed and was never shown to an audience, yet somehow it has found its way online. Those who claim to have watched the short say they have found it on a torrent site, with all the other episodes bundled on it. The other 17 episodes are normal, utterly unaltered from the originals, yet when they speak of the lost short, they are overcome with a sense of nausea and dread. The episode begins in much the same way as the other cartoons did, with the same opening credits and the same heroic music as there are in all the other intros.
Superman! To best be in a position to use his amazing powers in a never-ending battle for truth and justice.
The section in the opening where the narrator describes the destruction of Krypton and Superman's origin seems to be unchanged, though some viewers claim that the narrator sounds more aggressive this time around. The episode opens in the Daily Planet office, with Lois Lane and Clark Kent having a conversation. All seem to agree that the color palette of the episode seems to be dull compared to the older shorts, but some say that this is simply due to the age of the recording, while others say that the dull colors are due to budget issues. Clark is standing behind Lois's desk, while Lois herself is looking over the newest issue of the Daily Planet. Clark says,
"Hard to believe that it's been 2 years since the end of World War II. Lois?"
People agree that it seems to be the same actor from the old shorts, but clear. But like the narrator from before, he sounds aggressive and a little afraid when he reads his lines.
"Seems the world is safe for now with the X's dealt with."
I wouldn't be so sure about that, Kent.
Lois replied. Joanna Alexander, the voice actress of Lois, is known to sound rather shaky and nervous when she reads her lines.
Have a look at the story I got done on the front page.
The camera moves around to show the headline story. Red Menace working on nuclear weapons.
It seems the commies are conspiring against America,
said Lois. It was at this moment that the animation shifted. Now the animation looked as if the black and white storyboards had simply been pasted onto the tape with choppy stop-motion quality, lasting for the next 27 seconds or so. The audio for the storyboard segment is incredibly fuzzy and distorted, and the people who have watched this lost episode give varying accounts of what Clark and Lois are saying. Most people agree that Lois says Superman should put a stop to those dirty commies. What's even more bizarre about this sudden art shift is that people claim Clark is staring directly at the viewer during this part of the short. Others claim that he has no eyes at all during this segment. Some say that the storyboards are of such poor quality that it's impossible to tell where Clark is even looking. Those who have watched this episode state that the episode fades to static at the end of the bizarre storyboard segment, and when the cartoon returns to normal, it shows Superman talking with President Truman. Despite the normally fantastic nature of the Fleischer Superman shorts, this one segment is known to be oddly somber in tone. Low, tense piano music is playing throughout the conversation, but it's so soft that at times people forget that it's even playing. The Oval Office is filled with a thick darkness, as if the conversation is taking place at either dusk or early dawn, with very little light present to illuminate the characters.
You understand what has to be done, Superman?
President Truman asked. What's odd is, to this day, no one has been able to identify the voice actor of this character. Some claim that it's the real Harry Truman, but that's impossible, isn't it?
Of course, Mr. President,
Superman replied.
I understand the threats the Soviets pose. I'll do the patriotic duty of any American and do what I can to stop them.
The camera focuses in on Truman, and many people know that his face is far more detailed here than it was earlier. More detailed than any character in the entire short.
Good enough, Superman. America won't stand idly by and let another threat race up against us. I want you to strike those dirty commies down like the hammer of God and show them what they're up against.
The people who have given accounts of this last episode, while they all have differing views and opinions of Superman, all find this behavior to be wildly out of character for him. They don't seem able to believe Superman acting as some sort of government agent, nor can they believe Superman using his powers to attack a nation of people. As the conversation between Truman and Superman ends, the screen cuts to static again, before fading back in, showing Superman flying through the air. This segment is utterly devoid of sound, save for small crackles that are just barely noticeable. He flies directly over one landmass, with Russia written all over it, almost as if the image was taken from an atlas. Superman suddenly dive bombs straight down with an almost deafening sonic boom, breaking the silence from earlier. Just as Superman impacts against the cartoon representation of Moscow, the art style shifts again. This time it appears to be stark black and white footage of the Hiroshima bomb exploding, showing the mushroom cloud ballooning up into the air, while a distorted version of the Soviet Union's national anthem plays in the background. It's from this point on that the people who saw this last episode began to recall the nausea that they felt. While most people mentioned watching the destruction of Russian landmarks at Superman's hands, some who had watched this segment in slow motion have found some liminal imagery implanted into the footage. The imagery is graphic to say the least, and doesn't appear for more than a frame or two. Those who have seen the subliminal imagery describe it as being grainy black and white photographs, likely taken during World War II. The images include a picture of a mass grave and an unidentified concentration camp, an American soldier with a bayonet jammed into his throat, a picture of several people being torched by a flamethrower, and lastly a 30-frame long picture of several charred corpses in the ruins of Hiroshima. The last scene of the episode is described as being equally traumatic. Superman stands on a mound of flaming rubble, with a deformed caricature version of Stalin cowering before him. Superman lifts him firmly by the neck, his vice-like grip causing the cartoon Stalin to make realistic gagging and choking sounds. He flails against Superman, but of course, as it's Superman, he can do nothing to break free. Superman smiles, not a demonic one or a psychopathic smile, an honest and friendly kind of smile that Superman is best known for. In this context, such a warm smile is just as disturbing. The camera zooms in slowly, Superman smiling all the while, and then his eyes slowly start to glow various shades of red and gold. While nobody can feel any sympathy for Stalin for what happens next, for the simple fact that it's Stalin, people tend to agree that his fate is overly graphic and gruesome. A burst of heat and light explodes out of Superman's eyes. The scene seems to go on in slow motion, as we can see the caricature of Stalin's skin being peeled off of his body by the force of Superman's heat vision. The force peels off Stalin's muscle tissue, and then vaporizes his organs, until he's simply a skeleton. Then his bones break apart, and then are reduced to dust, scattered by the wind. People have noted that, while these shots normally have very high quality, this scene is incredibly detailed. The camera zooms into a close-up of Superman's smiling face, the fires of the ruined city flickering behind him. He looks directly at the viewer and winks. It's at this moment that the image of Superman winking freezes up, and the warped music lingers on one drawn-out note. This lasts for a little over 7 seconds, and then the episode ends. People are conflicted about why this episode exists in a state like this. The most common belief is that famous studios protested what the War Department wanted to turn Superman into, and made the show overly graphic so that it would never see the light of day. Others think that, while the audio clips in the episode are real, the animation is simply an elaborate hoax. With the correct resources, anything can be done, right? The last mystery about this last episode is that, as soon as a person finishes watching it, the file completely deletes itself from the viewer's computer and leaves no trace of its existence. If said viewer attempts to find the same torrent again, they simply can't no matter what site to check. Any attempts to find the upload of this torrent, assuming that it's been done by just one person, has ended in failure. For the first Family Guy creepypasta that I've done so far, it's pretty interesting. I like that it's a rejected Halloween story, so we can get away with the gore cliche. I just wish that this pasta was longer, because it was really starting to get interesting before it abruptly ended. As you all know, I'm planning to make a top 10 Family Guy episodes list in January, so this is pretty good timing to do this pasta. On the night of December 15th, 2006, an unlisted lost episode of Family Guy aired on Fox. It was originally produced in 2006 as a Halloween special in Season 5, but it was cancelled and shelved because Fox thought it might be too disturbing and frightening. They were right. No one knew that this episode existed until it aired. The reason for why it randomly aired unannounced is unknown. It was rumored to have been a complete accident. The episode was entirely in black and white, had terrible quality, extremely bad audio, and the animation was done horribly. When it came on, the Family Guy theme song didn't appear, instead just black screen and awkward silence. Then after about 30 seconds, a random beeping noise started, and soon a message appeared that said September 8th, 2006, Family Guy Episode X, The Black Dawn. The first shot shows the Griffin's kitchen. Lois has finished making breakfast, and she told Peter to call the kids. Chris and Stewie come downstairs, but not Meg. In here, everyone seems either very depressed or angry, and Brian oddly sits in the corner of the living room and doesn't talk. When Peter goes upstairs to get Meg, he sees her naked, cutting herself and drinking her own blood. He calls her name, and she starts running towards him and slits his throat. Pretty soon, Peter dies, and Meg shoves him in her closet. The family hears Peter fall to the floor and rush to see what happened. They see Meg covered in bloody razor blade cuts. Lois asks what happened to her, and then Peter falls out of the closet because Meg didn't do a good job putting him in there. The family's in shock, and Lois starts heavily sobbing. Meg then grabs an axe, hidden under her bed, and chops Lois's head off. She takes a bite out of her head. Stewie and Chris run downstairs to escape. They try to warn Brian, who's still sitting in the corner of the living room. He just ignores them. When they try to call him again, his head turns all the way around, and he has a very creepy smile on his face. He looks possessed. He then tries to attack them. He chases them into the kitchen, where Stewie grabs a knife and stabs him in the heart. Chris appears to be upset about what Stewie did, but he tells him that he had no choice, and quickly forgives him. May comes downstairs and chases them outside. They go and hide into Swanson's house. They tell Joe about the situation. He then tries to deal with her, but she chops him with her axe, and does the same goodbye. Chris and Stewie escape to the basement. A few days later, they come out to see that nearly everything has been destroyed. They find a newspaper and find out that a virus broke out, and the zombie apocalypse came. They stand in the middle of the road where there is nothing but dead silence. Then they see Meg and several other zombies, including Peter and Brian, and the neighbors charging towards them. They also find a chainsaw lying on their front lawn. Stewie grabs it and starts killing zombies with it. Meg is the only one still left alive, but Stewie sees that Chris was killed by the zombies with his face eaten off. Stewie gets distracted by this and then gets killed by Meg. At this point, the quality gets even worse. Meg then takes her axe and accidentally chops her own head off. The scene then pans out and cuts to stack, and the episode ends. So that was my first wish list collection. I hope you all enjoyed it. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and I'll see you all in 2015 with more game reviews and creepypasta reviews and TV reviews and movies and all that kind of stuff. So I'll see you all in 2015. It's definitely gonna be a much more interesting year because I'm getting back on schedule finally. And if I'm correct, given how everything's gonna work out, it's actually not gonna be one video per week, it's actually gonna be two now. Since I'm finally getting everything back on schedule with my life and stuff. So it's gonna be one on Monday and one on Friday.